Let's take a look at um, the Ode to a Nightingale by Keats. Uh, so outside of his house, John Keats, who's really young, he's like 23, I think, is sitting under a tree and he sees a nightingale in the trees. And that inspires him to write this, which he does on little scraps of paper. And some say that he got them mixed up by the time he got in the house, and all sorts of things are interesting about this poem and its composition. But he is writing a form that that takes into consideration the public idea of the ode and the formalness of it, but he also remains personal. And so to me, that's the big difference between these forms. So this poem I can relate to 100%. So let's look at this. Ode to a Nightingale, section 1. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains 1 minute past, and lethe words had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. So I just want to make a few remarks about this stanza, remarkable stanza. My begins, my heart, my sense. The speaker is directly involved in the poem from the first word. And that my applies to me as a reader, as well as the speaker himself. He's languishing, he's hanging around, right? John Keats was trained as an apothecary, which was a medicine person, not quite a doctor, but a doctor's aide, let's say. And he was in love with a woman named Fanny Braun, and he died when he was 26 of tuberculosis at Piazza de España in Rome. And he wrote some of the greatest English poems of any age, but especially his own. And he's considered a romantic of the Romantic era, 1789 to 1830. So we have heart, we have drowsy numbness, and then this word pains. Where does that come from? I don't associate pain with drowsy numbness. I associate pain with something sharp. So a drowsy numbness pains my sense. What's the cause of this pain? As though of hemlock I had drunk. Well, hemlock, which was Socrates' drug, the drug that killed Socrates, who was forced to drink, that would, I assume, make one drowsy and unfeeling, to not feel any pain, to like go out all of a sudden with, a kind of a downer drug, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed and lethe words had sunk. So I'm feeling this pain. It's a drowsy pain. It's a numb pain, as though I had drunk hemlock or had taken opiates, swallowed opiates to the drains. 1 minute passed. Laudanum was a big drug during that time, and it was medically prescribed for all kinds of pains, including pregnancy and childbirth. And it was a very major opiate And a lot of people got addicted, like Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who's another romantic. So he's in this moment, he's lethargic for some reason. It seems emotionally driven. We don't know the cause. And then this colon, Lethe words had sunk. The Lethe River, the river of forgetting that ferries across forgetting and death, that ferries people across after they've died into, ferries them into the underworld. Colon, 'tis not through envy of your happy lot. Your happy lot. Who's the your, right? That's the only time I'm aware in this stanza, the first time I'm aware in the stanza of it being a nightingale he's referring to. Your happy lot. The nightingale's happy, but being too happy in thine happiness, in your happiness again, that thou, you, light-winged dryad of the trees, sprite, fairy of the trees, in some melodious plot of beech and green and shadows numberless, you sing of summer in full-throated ease. So the speaker is noticing this bird and watching this bird and hearing this bird, and therefore we have song involved, and the bird is producing this sound through its throat, through its, through its physical being. And yet the physical being of the speaker is dragging him down, but he's aware of this other physical being who is not dragged down by his physical form, not earthbound, flying out into the shadows numberless, right? And how beautiful that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beech and green. Beechen is such a great word. Beech and green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. The musicality of this poem is beyond compare for me. Second section, and notice that they are separated, like physically, to, oh, for a draught of vintage wine that hath been cooled a long age in the deep delved earth in the wine cellar, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and Provençal song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim and purple stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen, and with thee fade away into the forest dim, fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret, here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last gray hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden-eyed despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. He travels really far in these two stanzas, from where he sits, and then again the drinking thing, like the idea that in the first stanza there's hemlock drunk, right? There's the idea of the opiate drunk to the drains, right? And then in the second stanza, drinking of the wine, which is mirthful and pleasant, more than pleasant, jubilant, celebratory, and the sun, right? The sunburnt mirth, the warm South, Italy. And they often, English often did tours to Italy during Keats's lifetime. The Hippocrene is a river, right? With beaded bubbles winking at the brim, which may recall to us that the river could be, all a wine river, right? It could be wine, but it could also be the bubbles at the brim of the glass, and they're drinking this burgundy colored wine, right? Purple stained mouth, and it's very sensuous. And the sensuousness of that leads to the beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. So love undergirds a lot of this. So maybe his lethargy is because of love in this poem at the beginning. But the idea of youth growing pale and spectre thin and dies and dying, youth growing like into a ghost before our eyes. I first read this in I don't know, 91, something 92, and AIDS was happening. So I heard this when I first read it as an AIDS poem. I mean, people were dying every week. I mean, it was intense, and I knew them, you know, and it was really hard. But it was also a situation of youth growing old, like a lot of young people were dying. So I was reading this as an AIDS poem at that time. Away, away, right? He wants to go away. He wants to leave his body away, for I will fly to thee. Thee is in the Nightingale again, not charioted by Bacchus, the god of drink, god of wine, and his pards, his flying, God, what are pards? Flying tigers, flying, you know, animals. But on the viewless wings of poesy, on poetry, I'm going to fly away. Though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with thee, tender is the night. There's where Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald gets its title. And happily the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by all her starry fairies. But here there is no light. Here on earth there is no life, save from what heaven is with the breezes blown through verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways. The sensuality of his language is really amazing. And now he's gone. He's with the bird completely. I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in embalmed darkness, guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild, white hawthorn, and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose, full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. The flies bring us back to the world, right? And the world of death in particular. Darkling, another name for the bird, I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful death, called him soft names and many a mused rhyme to take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever seems it sweet to die, to cease upon the midnight without pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have ears in vain, to thy high requiem become a clod of earth. And here it seems important to say that without pain. So we went from pain in the, right, my heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense as though I had drunk of hemlock, right? So we've gone from that to now there's no pain, and the intermediary to those two opposing experiences for the speaker is the bird, and he's been off with the bird in his imagination, right? Of course he couldn't fly off. He went in his imagination, and the imagination is a balm to him. It's a comfort. And so and that's a very romantic idea, that I don't need to experience something to be able to imagine it. Thou, the bird again, wast not born for death, immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. The voice I heard this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperor and clown. Perhaps the self same song that found a path through the sad heart of Ruth when, sick for home, she stood in tears amid the alien corn. The same that oft times hath charmed magic casements, opening on the foam of perilous seas in fairy lands forlorn. This has allusions that I forget. I don't remember the biblical Ruth anymore, but you can look that up if you're curious. It also, this stanza gives birth to a really famous poem called Sailing to Byzantium by William Butler Yeats. The In Ancient Days by Emperor and Clown is pretty much directly in that poem. So he's again, though, seeking for a world beyond the world we're living in, and who the hell wouldn't? I mean, look at it. On the one hand, I can say, the world of COVID, the world of, 500,000 dead, the world of Vietnam, the world of Darfur. I mean, on and on and on. The wars, the difficulties, the illnesses, the abuse of power, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, spring's coming, right? And in about, 5 weeks, we'll have a very changed landscape that where I'm standing right now is really beautiful and undeniably amazing. So would I want to leave this world? Well, on the one hand, sure, because look, I don't want to get old and get, Alzheimer's or whatever. On the other hand, I would miss too many things to count. So Keats's poem takes me to these really far, deep, intense places. Forlorn, so he connects directly linguistically. The very word is like a bell to toll me back from thee to my soul self. Adieu, the fancy cannot cheat so well as she is famed to do, deceiving elf. Adieu, adieu. The plaintive anthem fades past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. Was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music. Do I wake or sleep? I don't know why I feel so emotional about this poem. There's something really, really remarkable about God, what he does with this language. It's like, it's not even so much as him as the idea of wanting to leave the world that gets me. It's the way he's using the language. And so there's something that lives of his spirit in this poem that is just like beyond to me. And I hear that in Ian Curtis in Joy Division, which I was listening to a lot yesterday. I hear the soul of this dead guy, and it relates to my soul in a way that is unfathomable, invaluable, something that I cannot get from anyone who's living practically. I am just filled up with life when I read this, and it just takes me. So the end of this poem really gets me because he's got the story going. He's looking at the bird who's now flying past the meadows, over the stream, up the hillside, and the sound of it singing is buried deep, which Keats is going to be buried deep soon, as all of us are, in the next valley glades. And then he's like, did I really see that? Or was it purely imagination? So this stanza is really about the imagination. the fancy, the imagination can't cheat so well, can't give me a life that I haven't experienced, even though I've been taught and I believe at times that she can, because I'm sitting here under this tree still with my legs and arms and head, you know? And, but the imagination has changed me. And am I awake? Am I asleep? Am I alive? Am I dead? I walk through the town sometimes and I see people and they are not alive. You know, they're so worried about money and other shit that they're just not there anymore, you know, or they've been in such pain for so long because of whatever disease or what have you, you know. And so for me, poetry is a way to be as alive as possible.